Hello, welcome to Creative You Knitting and Crocheting Podcast. I'm your host, Catherine Kirby. We're still having cool to cold weather here in Pennsylvania. They're even talking about frost. So I finished my shawl and it was a time to celebrate. It was worthy of driving to Brewster's and getting ice cream. So the peacoat edging took several hours. And if you watch the last podcast, I had a significant amount of yarn left and it took almost all of it. So if I had played yarn chicken and got so far along and ran out, that would not have been nice. So I'm wondering, is the fad of wearing shawls backward compared to our grandmother's day? So I don't really know that I like that. Or are we going back to the traditional, showing my belly, traditional shawl wearing? So which is it? Or is it a little bit of both? So I'll put it on like that. That's the peacoat edging. I found that the peacoats were getting big, so I knitted them tightly because some of them really stuck out, and it was probably my yarn. And so I started to think, this isn't going to be very nice. So I'm always tempted to put something new on the needles, thinking, oh, I can finish this in a day. And I've been intrigued by this for a while. I've had it in my stash, Gossypium, and it calls for worsted weight yarn. And the nice thing is you do 4 rows, you repeat them 8 times, and you're finished. Once this is blocked, it's gonna have a very nice lacy look. Let's see here. And the yarn I chose is Debbie Bliss Rialto Chunky, which is a nice soft merino wool in like a dusty rose color. That used to be a very popular color, and then it kind of went out. And it is nice. It's a chunky instead of a worsted, and I just now realized that. So I probably should have gone up a needle size, but oh well. I'll probably make 2, one in a worsted yarn, and then we'll see. So we like to chat a little bit, and I thought that this week we would spend I didn't mean to turn that on. We would spend it on compliments. And so if you have a compliment that has changed your life, would you please write it in? And this is on YouTube. You can go to Fact Soup. And this is a story that they told that I think I heard before and forgot, and it really touched my heart. So I want to share it with you. And it was about an elementary teacher named Mrs. Thompson. And as she stood in front of her 5th grade class on the very first day, she told the children a lie. She told them that she loves them all the same and she doesn't have any favorites. But there in the front row, slumped in his seat, was a child that the year before she noticed he didn't play well with other children. His clothes were messy. He needed a bath. And he was unpleasant. And she actually took delight in marking a big red F on his papers. And it gave her pleasure. And at the school where she taught, she was required to review each child's past records. And she put Teddy's off till last. And when she reviewed his file, she was in for a big surprise. First grade, his teacher wrote, Teddy is a bright child with a ready laugh. He does his work neatly and has good manners. His second grade teacher wrote, Teddy's an excellent student, well liked by his classmates. but he has trouble because his mother has a terminal illness and life at home is a struggle. His third grade teacher wrote, his mother's death has been hard on him. He tries to do his best, but his father doesn't show much interest in him, and his home life will affect him if steps aren't taken. His fourth grade teacher wrote, Teddy is withdrawn and does not show much interest in school. He doesn't have many friends, and sometimes he sleeps in class. By now, Mrs. Thompson was ashamed of herself. She felt even worse when her students brought in Christmas presents all wrapped beautifully, except for Teddy's, which was clumsily wrapped in heavy brown paper from the grocery store. She took great pains to open it in the middle of the other present so as not to draw attention. Some of the children started to laugh when she found a rhinestone bracelet with stones missing and a bottle only a quarter full of perfume. But she stifled the children's laughter when she exclaimed, oh, the bracelet is so pretty, and she put it on and dabbed some perfume on her wrist. Teddy Stoddard stayed after school that day just long enough to say, Mrs. Thompson, today you smell just like my mom used to. After the children left, she cried for an hour. On that very day, she quit teaching reading, writing, arithmetic, and instead she began to teach children. She paid particular attention to Teddy, and as she worked with him, his mind seemed to come alive. The more she encouraged him, the faster he responded. By the end of the year, Teddy had become one of the smartest children in the class, and despite her lie that she would love all the children the same, Teddy became her teacher's pet. A year later, she found a note under her door from Teddy telling her she was still the best teacher he had ever had in his whole life. 6 years went by. He then wrote that he had finished high school third in his class, and she was still the best teacher in his whole life. 4 years after that, she got another letter saying that while things had been tough at times, he'd stayed in school and stuck it out and would graduate from college with the highest of honors. He assured Mrs. Thompson that she was still the best and his favorite teacher in his whole life. Then 4 more years passed and another letter came. He explained that he got his bachelor's degree and decided to go on. The letter explained she was still the best and favorite teacher he ever had. But now his name was a little longer. The letter was signed Theodore F. Stoddard, M.D. The story doesn't end there. You see, there was yet another letter that spring. Teddy said he'd met a girl and they were going to be married. He explained that his father had died a few years ago and he was wondering if Mrs. Thompson might agree to sit at the wedding in the place reserved for the mother of the groom. Of course. And guess what? She wore that bracelet, the one with the rhinestones missing. And she made sure she was wearing the perfume that Teddy remembered his mother wearing on their last Christmas together. They hugged each other, and Dr. Stoddard whispered in her ear, "Thank you, Mrs. Thompson, for believing in me. Thank you so much for making me feel important, showing me that I could make a difference." With tears in her eyes, she whispered back, she said, "Teddy, you have it all wrong. You were the one who taught me that I could make a difference. I didn't know how to teach until I met you." So, aren't you saying, well, isn't this a knitting and crocheting podcast? Yes, but it's also about life. So do you have a compliment or somebody that cared and poured compliments into you and made you become special and all those things they told you you were. I've told this story before, so this is one of my stories. When I was a nurse, I was a hard worker. I had 4 children and money was always tight, and I was diligent about my job. I loved the patients. There was a nurse who was younger than me, and she had long hair. She would braid it, and she was just so cute, and she was always giggling with the patients, and her laughter was just so infectious. And I loved her. And then one day I heard her mention my name, and she was talking about someone she knew, and she said, yeah, she has mousy brown hair like Catherine. Well, that's me. And that was not a compliment, and it hurt. It did. I was much more sensitive back then than I am now. And then I began to frame myself that I was not interesting, and I compared myself to her. And you know, when you compare yourself to someone, you always come up short. So not long after that, it was afternoon, and I went into a patient's room, and she was resting in bed, and I was just quietly straightening up her room and putting things away. And from her bed, she said, Catherine, you have the nicest manner about you. You just quietly go about your work, and it's so comforting to me. And that changed me. That made me appreciate me. So what's a story that you have? What's a compliment that made you feel special? Write in and share it. And if you give me permission, I'll share it on the podcast. So for now, get one of those items off your needles or off your crochet hook, and I'll see you the next time. Shine, baby, shine.